So, stumbled across a comment that brought a smile to my face because I've been waiting for this comment for some time to pop up on my videos. And I think it has before in the past, but I didn't respond to it or whatever. But anyway, someone left a comment. It was in context of I think somebody else was saying something about how, well, Satanists really aren't like that, or it was defending Satanism and, trying to debunk one of the, misconceptions about something. And then somebody replied in and said, do we still have to call this Satanism anymore? And that's something I've been waiting to hear somebody say, other than a Satanist, because I've talked about it too with a lot of other people that are Satanists, but it's more, I don't know, has a little bit more weight when somebody comes to that same conclusion who's not a Satanist and they're just a critical thinker, and just is like, why are we still calling this Satanism? I think it has something to do with the Satanic Temple or something like that. Anyway, regardless of what it did, the point being is that we don't have to call this Satanism anymore. With Satanism now being primarily understood as being the Satanic Temple, which really aren't Satanists anyway, but since that is the popular opinion now, thanks to their media endeavors, if someone were to call me a Satanist and I knew that they were referring to the Satanic Temple, I would have to say, no, I'm not a Satanist, but I am, because we are Satanists. A lot of us are Satanists from LaVeyan Satanists, right? Which I know there's going to be people here that listen and watch this and say, oh, well, it's not the only version of Satanism. Actually, it really is. Since he codified it, he brought it to the forefront. What is LaVeyan Satanism is what Satanism is. There are other things like it. It can be similar to it, but it's really not Satanism. It could be, that's why there's Luciferianism. That's why there's little splinters of Satanism. But Satanism in general as a whole, LaVeyan Satanism. So if people think it's a Satanic Temple, then I'm not a Satanist, because that's what they think a Satanist is. But what this guy was getting at is kind of a little bit more deeper than that, right? He's also getting at to the point where it's like, why? It's like, why would you call yourself a Satanist if you don't believe in the devil? Well, why would you call yourself a Satanist if, if people misunderstand what that is, and think, why would you continue to carry the label? And this is a good question, because a long time ago, 1960s, right, when LaVey decided to come forward with Satanism, right, which is kind of a hodgepodge of other philosophies as well, but when he brought it forward as Satanism, there was the culture, the climate was a lot different in 1966, right? There was more of a need for a philosophy that could be called Satanism, and whereas today, not so much. There's not so much a need for that anymore. I don't think so anyway. But in the 60s it was. There was a counterculture going on in the 60s. You had one aspect, you had a war breaking out, you had people, backlashing against the conservatism of the 1950s. You had the hippie movement, and then there's the counter to that, to the peace, love, drugs type thing. So there was a lot going on back then. And Satanism may have been more necessary, that label, right? I mean, because if you think about it, if I were to describe to you what a Satanist is, right, a lot of people watching this video who would never ever think to call themselves a Satanist would be sitting there and being like, actually, that's kind of, I kind of agree with that, or yeah, I can see that, or yeah, that's, so it's like basically a lot of the principles and foundations of Satanism are now socially acceptable or more commonly practiced than they were 60 years ago. So do we still call it Satanism, since people's definition of Satanism is back-ass words now, and Satanism has been gutted and stuffed with a bunch of pink lollipops? I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. And should we have to change the name Satanism to accommodate a group that may have taken it over and changed the definition of it, or at least popular media? When I say taken over, we shouldn't have to, and we don't have to at all. We can continue to call ourselves Satanists. People will continue to be confused, but I'm just saying basically that there's no real reason to hold on to a label that no longer has the same meaning. Now, it may have the same meaning to you, may have the same meaning to me, somebody who grew up. I mean, even when I was turned on to Satanism in the 90s, in the early 90s, still a different time back then. There was still more of something going on back then. Now, it's like, I mean, people just like If I sit here and explain Satanism to you, you'd be like, wow, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Basically, if you take off the fucking Halloween costumes, right? They're basically atheists, agnostics, I mean, there are differences, but basically atheists in Halloween costumes. Take off the Halloween costumes, throw out the part about magic and ritual, get rid of the pentagrams, get rid of the fucking funky, horns and stuff like that. And what do you have left? You have a philosophy of critical thinking, of common sense, of might is right, basically it. It's pretty much a very practical philosophy, and the whole ritual, magic, the devil shit, all that stuff came in, again, in the 60s, but also came in as kind of a way to make it appealing, making basically a simple philosophy, right, that's not actually that far unique. In fact, it's probably closest related philosophy, major philosophy, would be Buddhism. Okay, now of course there's differences, but that would be kind of, Satanism would be a branch of Buddhism. Now, by itself, it's not that appealing, but you throw in some magic, throw in some superstition, throw in some fear, throw in some, media hype. Now you got magic, you got ritual, you got horns, some people still do that. Some people still practice, but you see a lot of Satanists, most Satanists, people who consider themselves as Satanists, don't practice ritual. I don't. I have when I was younger, but a lot of that stuff, is a time and place. And right now, in this culture, in this day and era, I don't really see it really necessary as Satanism being a label, and it's like, it's funny how like a lot of people get to know me and then they find out I'm a Satanist, and they're like, thought you were cool, man. I'm like, what do you mean? You thought I was cool? I'm the same motherfucker. Now you're not cool, fucker. Like, it's like, what are we talking about here? It's just like, it's confusing. Now, I'm not saying that, and this by no means am I saying I'm not going to call myself a Satanist anymore. No. I mean, this is not something that I did lightly, right? I mean, it no longer has the value and the meaning that it once did. That's what I'm saying. And if somebody today, said like, didn't want to openly be identified as a Satanist because of what people think Satanism is now, I wouldn't necessarily blame them. I mean, that's not me. I wear my, my affiliations on my sleeves, literally. But, I could totally get it now. And, to the people, this generation below me, or second, third generation, whatever, the millennium generation, the generation that are now in their late teens, going into their 20s, they look at Satanism, and once they understand what it is, they're like, what's the big deal? But see, even that generation, when they looked at it and didn't know what it wasn't shocking. It wasn't like, it wasn't scary. Now, in the 60s and 70s, right, you heard the word Satanism, especially in the 80s in Satanic Panic, people lost their shit. Like, they didn't know. So it had that power to it. That word had power, right, to evoke fear, mystery. People didn't know what to expect. They didn't know what it meant. But nowadays, it's kind of like it no longer has shock value. It does, but not like it did. It doesn't. I think people just think it's silly. And why wouldn't they think it's silly? It is fucking silly. Turn on the fucking TV. Okay, see the Satanic Temple in schools, fucking passing out coloring books, protesting high school football games. It's fucking retarded. It is silly. So when people see Satanism, they hear Satanism, or you're a Satanist, it's like, this guy's fucking stupid. I get it. I totally get it. I don't necessarily disagree either. So, do we need to call it Satanism? No. I don't think we do. I don't think we need to call it anything. I mean, change the name. I don't think we should. But I don't see... It no longer has the same attraction, no longer has the same appeal, no longer has the same magical lure or the same punch to it that it once did. Now, S used to be, stand for sinister in Satanism. Now the S has been replaced, stands for sissy. I go on and on and make analogies like this all day. But yeah, you see what I'm saying? That's it. So, mad props, dude. Again, might have to go get me some Buddhist tattoos now, if there's any room left.